If you're a people pleaser, don't tell me, oh, I care too much about what other people. That's BS. If you're a people pleaser, what you're thinking about is yourself. Because you're like, I don't want to feel bad. So it's about me, not about her. It's the ultimate form of manipulation, people pleasing. Because now I have to manipulate her. If I'm sitting here just telling you what you want to hear all the time, what I'm doing is I'm trying to manipulate you.
And there's guys who'll say, happy wife, happy life, and they'll say things like that, and then they'll say, I'm being a nice guy, and they will do and say whatever their wife wants to hear, and then they'll go hang out with their buddies, and then they'll talk crap on them. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rising Father Podcast. I'm Chris Rodack. I'm talking to Christine Jewell. She's a high-performance executive coach. She's an author. She's a speaker. She's a coach. She just wrote the book, Drop the Armor. And she has amazing, insightful, deep things to say to all of us, especially you men out there. So first question. First off, welcome. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me here. I feel so honored to be having a little piece of these guys' ears today.
Absolutely.
Hopefully I get to drop some gold into your listeners' ears that they can actually take away and integrate.
Absolutely. It's going to be great. So first question right off the bat, I'm excited to ask you, who is dropping the armor?
Who is dropping the armor? Drop the Armor was written for the warriors at heart, those who identify as being a warrior, guys and women who feel like they've been fighting battles their whole life and are at a crossroads and they are exhausted. The way they're fighting or trying to fight isn't working anymore, whether that's in their business, in their marriage, in their health. And everything that maybe used to work is no longer working. And so they're kind of like, either I want to burn it all down and start over, maybe thinking about exiting, or going like, what's next? How do I do this different going forward? I actually wanted to name the book Fight Different, but the editor said no, because I think a lot of us are just caught up in these same battle, different day. Mm-hmm. And so this is about how to make it a better fight for something way bigger, something way better that's actually life-giving. Okay.
So if you're a guy out there, you're a 30-something guy, and you're having, your main issue is right now your marriage. Whenever you got married, you were in love, you were passionate, you were flirtatious, but now some tension has crawled into your marriage, and things aren't like they used to be. Does that guy or the wife need to drop their armor, or both of them?
Both of them probably, because they are in this dance together. They attracted each other. And, right, we always get attracted to the person that hopefully makes us more of who we are, or the one who shows a big light on everything we get to heal that we haven't dealt with yet, so that we can become who we're created to be. And I ultimately believe that right relationship makes you more of who you are. Right? When you're in the right relationship and the relationship is structured right, then you should be amplified. You should be more of who you are. You should feel like more of yourself, not less of yourself.
So the right relationship should make you feel more of who you are. Mm-hmm. Have you come across a lot of relationships where the opposite is true?
Many. It is very common, right? Where people are like, and I'm going to say, like, again, you asked me before we started this, it's like, is it men or women you're talking to? And I want to say that oftentimes when we've got unresolved drama, trauma, old patterns that we picked up, because more's caught than taught, right? We watch our parents, how they treat each other. We watch how we're treated, and we're like, oh, this is the blueprint. This is the blueprint for what it's like to be a man, or this is the blueprint for a woman. And so we keep repeating and replaying out these patterns a lot of the time. And so usually what happens is by the time people probably get to you or get to me or get to this book, they've been playing out these dysfunctional roles, either role reversals or dysfunctional roles, or they have a dysfunctional dynamic or view of what relationships are, that nobody actually ever taught them what a healthy relationship looks like, sounds like, feels like, operates like, right? Mm-hmm. So all they know is what they know, so they just repeat it.
And then they get married and they're just reenacting the same dysfunction they had as a child.
Totally. And I want to go back to something you said, because it's really powerful, especially men who often I talk to, they're like, oh, I used to be all hot and chemistry and passion, and now like it's gone. And I just want to say two things to that. Number one, a lot of that crazy hot passion and chemistry is actually a trauma bonding of your nervous system. So if you grew up in a home where it was really chaotic or unsafe or whatever, oftentimes your nervous system will get re-excited by a similar experience, right? So I attracted like extreme athletes and like a lot of dramatic relationships that were very hot and heavy and chemistry and all this stuff. But it was like this old trauma bond. And after that initial chemistry kind of goes off, it was like, it was a hot mess, you know, hot, cold, on, off. The other piece of that though is also if it started off great and then boom, all of a sudden it's like the dry spell, then we go, okay, cool. We somehow lost the safety, right? People don't feel safe. They start putting walls up of protection. They're self-preserving. I have to, you know, preserve my image, preserve my self-worth, or like your idea of who, you know, I am or whatever. And so we start walling up, and it actually desensitizes us. So all of these walls that we put up of pretending, of identities, of, you know, whatever, numbing ourselves, it creates like walls and walls and walls that desensitize us from each other. So now like I don't even feel anything anymore. I actually hear that a lot, right? We almost like get apathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that a ton. I've had guys who've transformed their lives, but their first call with me, this one guy specifically, he said, I feel like I haven't felt any emotion in years.
Yeah.
And they can remember a time when they felt a lot of emotion, and for whatever reason, desensitized, or they just, you know, a lot of times when the guys say that, at the same time they've gained a lot of weight, they've lost a lot of discipline, a lot of other areas of their life have kind of fell apart. I'm going to talk about this trauma bonding more, because that's a very large topic. It's very deep. It kind of reminds me of, I think it might have been Tony Robbins. Someone talks about returning to our emotional home, our emotional safe place where, you know, it could be created by childhood teachers or whatever growing up, and then as you're an adult, you like to return to that emotional home. That emotional home might not be a happy place. It might be depression, stress, anxiety, or whatever that is. So what you're saying is if a guy has a relationship like that, maybe with his mom or whoever, as a young person, whenever he grows up, he's looking for that same type of emotion, whether it be traumatic or not.
Well, yeah, and most of this is unconscious, like the majority of it, meaning, and by the way, just, I don't know if your audience is familiar with the terms, but a lot of people think that we know what unconscious is, so I'm just going to go ahead and like unpack that.
I'm a very educated audience.
Okay. So, but your unconscious is basically what's running in your automatic nervous system, right? It's in your body, it's in your cells. So it's like, okay, your memory, your body's memory remembers this, but your prefrontal, like you're not thinking about it every day, right? So we repeat what we experience. So to the point about Tony, absolutely. He talks about the emotional home, something I talk about a lot. He says, you know, whose love did you crave the most as a child? Who did you need to be loved by them? So if I think about my dad, well, you know, he was CIA, high achieving, high performing, always on the go. And every time I scored goals or I, you know, got the grades or I looked really good, it was like, oh, daddy's paying attention, right? But he was also super volatile. So like one day he's super loving and the next day he throws you across the room. And it's like, this is really confusing. Love is confusing. You know, it's volatile, it's up and down, and I need to be all these things in order to get their love. And so we unconsciously, our body, you know, our body is familiar in those environments. And psychologically, you know, we still have an idea or a belief system that that's what love looks like. That's what love feels like, right? And emotionally, we don't actually know. Nobody taught us what it was actually like to receive love and affection in a healthy, stable, safe environment where we didn't have to transact or perform for it.
Yeah. Where we didn't have to transact or perform for it, where we were accepted. Yeah. Accepted for who you are, loved for who you are. That reminds me of, with even just parenting. It's whenever with our kids, if they're displaying an emotion, sometimes we could say, well, that's an acceptable emotion, that's not an acceptable emotion. And we can give or withdraw our love based on how they're reacting and the horrible consequences that can show up as adults. And I see that as, if I have a guy who has to act in a certain way to get a certain reaction from his wife, or he feels like he always needs her approval, to me that stems back from, well, when I was a kid, my mother or father or whatever, I had to perform or act in a certain way to get love, respect, or attention from them. So I think about that all the time when I talk to my kids, even like disciplining them, telling them what's right and wrong. when am I going to do that? When's it appropriate? What's the tone of my voice going to be? What's my I'm really careful not to be super judgmental when I'm judging them. Super not judgmental whenever I'm trying to discipline them and correct their behavior, because I know all these little things can trickle up years later and have disastrous consequences. Do you? How does this play out? I know. How does this play out in a dysfunctional relationship? Like, give me some. Concrete examples.
I'll give you a concrete example, but I also want to say, I have 6 kids. Between Mark and I, we have 6 kids. We're a blended family, ages 8 to 22. And, we're always doing the best we can with the level of awareness that we have to parent to the best of our ability, right? I mean, you can go back and beat yourself up about what you did wrong and stuff. Like, as you grow in awareness, you have more wisdom, hopefully. That's called earned experience. Wisdom is earned from experiences. Hopefully you be more intentional about how you parent. And the reality is, part of it is the delivery for sure, but a lot of it is our receptors. It's like the lens I'm receiving it through, right? So I can be looking at you and I'm like, all of a sudden the look on your face triggers an unconscious memory from the past of, it could have been a stranger that looked at me and I felt deep shame as a kid, and all of a sudden that look is like, why are you looking at me like that? Because this shame washes over me. So I'm saying that we can't ever prevent it, but once we have awareness of where these things come from, we can start to do our work on, getting past it. So let's talk about some concrete steps. So here's I think one that a lot of your guys can relate to. My husband, so this is our second marriage. He grew up in a home where his dad, they grew up on a farm. Basically, if you sat down for more than 3 seconds, unless you were eating or going to the bathroom, you're lazy. Yeah. Get up and do something, And when he was 6 years old, he remembers his older sister giving him a bowl of ice cream and his dad walking in. And he's 6 years old, okay? 6 years old. His dad walks in and he's loses it because he's eating ice cream in the middle of the day. And there's chores to do and there's things to do and throws the ice cream bowl across the room. Now, okay, maybe that seems extreme, but again, you don't have to have the ice cream bowl thrown or whatever, but it's just, it could be a comment. It could be a look. Fast forward, this was the pattern that his dad has, a very dominant personality. And I want to say it could be the other way around. It could be an avoidant personality, but very dominant. So then Mark, his ex-wife, was also constantly what are you doing? Why are you sitting down? He ended up attracting and marrying his dad all over again, right? So every time he wasn't allowed to take naps. He was not allowed to sit down on the couch and watch, a football game or anything. And so it was funny that even after we got married, he had done a lot of healing, but it's still he's still doing the work in his nervous system. He would notice that he'd be sitting on the couch and I'd walk in the room and he'd jump up for a second. I'm like,
I wasn't sitting.
I was like, what are you doing? He's like, dang, that's that old program. And I don't care. He could take a nap. Yesterday he napped for 3 hours in the hammock or something.
Lazy guy.
But it was releasing that program takes a lot of intention to realize, oh man, I'm so programmed to just jump up and pretend like I'm doing something or, right? And that's just one example of where we can't actually relax even in our own home.
Yes.
I don't know if that was tactical enough, but that's one example.
That is. And what I think, what's hard to do and what's important to do is to be the ability to dig into yourself and do the hard, painful work of digging into your past and saying, okay, what was some of this trauma that I went through that could be causing some of my current issues, and it's not fun. But a lot of times that's where journaling comes into play. That's where if you can be really open and honest with yourself, you can make some massive breakthroughs and transformations. And some of the guys I'm working with, that's if you did nothing but journal, you could have a massive transformation yourself. Because a lot of these painful thoughts and emotions you have, you can finally see them on paper. And you can say, oh, that's what's happening. So in terms of okay, what can I do? I'm a guy, I'm confused, I'm hurting, I'm in chaos right now. I'll give something, take out a piece of paper, start journaling your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts. It doesn't have to be perfect. No structure is fine. Just write it down. And then, man, can you back up in time a little bit to whenever you were a child? Did something happen? Is there a reason that you're feeling that certain way? I know I can go back. I came from a huge family. We had 8 brothers and sisters, 2-bedroom house, like we talked about. And we were just pounding on the bathroom for people to get out. So for me, I got that little connection. It's whenever people are in the bathroom, like, oh my God, I got to get out of the bathroom real quick because someone's in her waiting for me. Because there's always like, you got to get out of the bathroom, someone's waiting. But let's like say like to a guy, do this. Like if a guy's listening and he has this issue, one of these issues where something traumatic happened to him when he was, a child, how does he start this process of discovering that and healing?
Yeah. Well, you named a couple things. We always say like there's three. Well, let's back up. First of all, the first step with anything is awareness, right? We're so used to noticing what everybody else thinks of us, what everybody else said about us, or what's working. Like we're so externally focused that awareness, self-awareness is the ability to observe yourself, to actually observe, oh, look, I just did that. I just totally shut down. I just, went to an escape mode, and to be able to have the desire and then to make the decision, like, I'm going to just observe for a minute instead of judging myself. Because a lot of this hiding and stuff like that is actually because you're also judging yourself, right? You're trying to hide from yourself. You're trying to hide yourself from others. And so like, instead of judging yourself, just observe your patterns a little bit. So you said journaling, every single one of us has an origin story. Like the program, we're programmed. Every single one of us has been programmed, right? So it's like, whose program was that? Like, as I just saw myself go that, like, take a minute, take a beat to notice, oh, wow, like that, the way that I just spoke to my kid, or the way I just hid from my wife or just checked out, like, oh, that was dad's program, or that was granddad's program, or that was mom's program. Like, and what they do is like, we get the baton, right? It's like, okay, they're actually not our belief systems, they're passed on. And so I think the first step is like just a desire, honestly, for some self-reflection instead of a fear of it or a judgment. I think a lot of us don't, they say the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear the most, right? So it's like, am I willing to get raw and real, honest, take a good hard look at myself without needing to beat myself up about it? Like, and I think that this is where a lot of especially some of the masculine programs, it's all like, you gotta, like, they're yelling and they're using all of this, like, right, you gotta like beat yourself into submission or something. And it's like, if you can actually learn to be kind to yourself for a minute, if your wife is criticizing you and cutting to pieces, you're probably doing it to yourself unconsciously. And so it's like, can you just make the decision to observe yourself, watch yourself, record yourself? And when, again, you use journaling, right? If you journal, even if you just go sit in the car when you're driving, sit an extra 2 minutes when you get somewhere and just notice, oh, how did that go? How did I show up? Interesting. Okay. Sit at the dinner table when you're with your family instead of, stressing about what you're wanting to run away from, or what everybody's not doing or thinking, or what you can't wait to get away from them. Just observe how you are in that environment. And the second piece of that, I think, is, so that's number one, is self-reflection, is self-awareness, is being able to look at yourself, not through the eyes of everyone else, without judgment. And that's hard to do, because you'll notice the judgment is like, dang, I notice that so many times when I'm doing it, I'm like, man, I got a big old whip on myself right now. Right? Like, or I'll feel, there's a bunch of anger. One of the guys, I deal with a lot of guys that have a lot of anger or unresolved bitterness or resentment. And it's like, notice where it is in your body. Like, oh, isn't that interesting? Where did that come from? What is that about? And get curious. You start asking questions instead of trying to run away from it or making it wrong or right. So I think observe it, start to ask questions. And the third piece is really like, when you start labeling things, they lose their power. And what I mean by that is, like, if you and I if we even just say, like, wow, there's a lot of anger, like there's a lot of heat going on inside, like and we start addressing it instead of being like, I'm so that. You're not it. What you're doing is you're having an experience with it. It starts to lose its power. And a practical example of that too is, like, I do this a lot. I do a lot of work with couples. And so there's a lot of unspoken tension in the air a lot of times between couples. There's just like unspoken things or unresolved issues or things that are piling up, and I don't feel like you ever listen, so I'm just going to bitch and complain, right? And part of it is like, there's just a lot of tension in the air. Just like call it out. Like, the energy feels messy,
How would you say that to your wife if you're a guy and it's tense? Is it best to be direct? Give us the female's perspective. if you're my wife and things are tense between us, what should I say to you?
Well, the first thing before you say anything, especially if you're dealing with a woman that's armored up, rigid, tense, critical, defensive, she's either attacking or defending, which means she's in survival mode. So if a woman feels unsafe, the first order of business is to establish safety in the atmosphere before you say anything. So I would say number one is check your state. Are you tense and rigid? Are you awkward and uncomfortable going in there? Are you expecting a fight? Because if you are, you got to go do the work and train yourself and learn how to calm your nervous system, breath work, shift your state. Because when you go into a room, you're bringing something and it either feels threatening or not. And so I would say that's step number one, because the first order of business is to create an atmosphere of safety. And your body posture, the way you carry yourself into that room, you got to check yourself. And that's why I always tell the guys, like, presence is power. And you have way more power than you realize to shift the atmosphere, really get her to relax. But you got to be relaxed. Not disassociated or passive. There's a difference. Because a lot of guys, I'm totally relaxed. I'm like, no, you're not even here. You're like somewhere else, And she can sense that. Like, are you actually here, Chris? Like, are you fully here in your body and you actually want to be here? Because that's really what every woman is asking. Like, are you here? Do you hear me? Do you even care about what I'm saying? Are you even listening?
Yes. Very good. I think that's great. It's hard. That's hard though, because
it is hard.
If you're mad, if you're pissed off, and used to doing this kind of work, and you and your wife are tense, and she's in the living room, you're in the kitchen, you walk into the kitchen, it's hard not to have that look on your face, that tone in your voice, that presence that you're talking about whenever you talk to her. So if you're feeling like that and you have to address this with your wife, does time help? Just counting to 10, counting to 20, taking a step outside and reevaluating?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you got to check your state. Secondly, you've got to notice if you're in a hostile environment. Also, our environments are triggers, right? Like bedrooms are triggers sometimes for people, or the kitchen. And actually, one of the things that my husband and I do a lot is, like, we'll go for a walk together, and all of a sudden it's like neutral ground, right? Yeah. So, or we're on a drive or something. I also want to say this, that there's a lot of power in just the right kind of touch. And I want to say that a lot of the collective wounding in the feminine has been around the aggressive nature or the absence, either one or the other, of touch, right? From the guy. So an actual, like, touch that's like a hug, like, hey, I'm right here. I got you. Those are like magical words. Those are powerful words. And I can remember, again, I'm going to use the example. My husband does this real well. We both practice this a lot. But if he notices that I'm getting worked up, I might be stressed about something with work or the kids, or maybe I'm a little bit critical, he'll actually come over and be like, hey, I'm right here. Remember, we don't do this. I got you. And he'll just give me a hug. And it's like, boom, right away. I'm like, oh, right. Okay. We don't need to do it that way. Like, we can talk about it. It takes a lot of awareness for a guy to do that and not make it about you. Oh, here she goes again. It must be about me. It's like, can you be the one that leads? And I think that's really the key, is learning how to be the one that leads instead of waiting for her to be relaxed so that you can go talk to her. Mm-hmm. You got to create the atmosphere. You're the structure. The masculine is the structure.
A lot of guys are scared of their wives. There's a lot of guys out there who are terrified of their wives, and they won't be able to step into that leadership position and do the things you're saying if they're too scared of their wife. How does that dynamic, because it doesn't start like that, how is that created?
It's created by not addressing what you're actually scared of, which is not her. You might be scared of failing. You might be scared of being rejected. You might be scared of hearing no. You might be scared of being perceived as weak, right? And so I think what happens is that a lot of guys don't want to experience, and women do this too, but we start off, putting on a persona, or maybe it starts off with this thing that people say, like, especially ultimate people pleasers. If you're a people pleaser, don't tell me, oh, I care too much about what other people. That's BS. If you're a people pleaser, what you're thinking about is yourself, right? Because you're like, I don't want to feel bad. So it's about me, not about her. It's the ultimate form of manipulation, people pleasing, because now I have to manipulate her.
Let's say that again.
People pleasing is the ultimate form of manipulation. Because now if I'm sitting here just telling you what you want to hear all the time, what I'm doing is I'm trying to manipulate you.
Mm-hmm. And there's guys who will say happy wife, happy life. And they'll say things like that, and then they'll say, I'm just, I'm being a nice guy. And they will do and say whatever their wife wants to hear, and then they'll go hang out with their buddies, and then they'll talk crap on them.
And I think that there is a natural, I want to say something real quick. There is a natural, God put it in you guys. God put it in your DNA to want to please, provide, protect the feminine. That's part of the package of, procreation and everything else. It's like, okay, you want to serve your wife. You want to be there for her. You want to provide. So I don't want to negate, that's part of your design. The thing is, it gets twisted, right? And then we use it as an excuse. And any gift or anything that's misused will be abused. And so if you don't understand the purpose of something, you'll abuse it. So what does it actually mean for you to actually care for your wife, to create an environment where she's actually happy? Because telling her everything she wants to hear and giving her everything she wants doesn't actually make her happy. And I know this because I work with a bunch of women on the back end, right?
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure that we close the loop on that last question is if you're terrified of your wife, the reality is you're operating from fear. So I would just say, what are you really afraid of? Are you afraid that, what is it? Not because it's not about her response. Her response is making you feel a certain way, and you don't like that feeling. You're afraid of feeling that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can train yourself to be okay, I got to normalize actually feeling all the feelings. Discomfort, anger, a little bit of jealousy sometimes. That's normal. You're human. You're going to have feelings. And we try to shove the ones we don't like away, and we only want to feel the good ones. And so it's when you do that, you rob yourself of the whole experience. You know extreme joy because you know extreme sadness, right? You know extreme unity because you also know what it's like when you're not unified. So the more you give yourself permission to actually feel the things you're afraid of feeling, something begins to change. You're not running from it anymore. And I think a lot of guys listening might be running from their wives, running from the truth, running from their feelings, running from who they are and who they're called to be.
Yeah, because you get stuck in this complacent, scared state, and that can last for years. Some guys never get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful thing to see a guy go from a scared, shut down life to fully expressing himself. And you see the change in the wife. I had a guy who's been with me for 4 months now. He joined initially for marriage issues, and he was kind of scared of his wife. He told me, he said, I'm a yes man. I want to please my wife. I was a happy wife, happy life kind of guy because my dad was. He flat out said that. And through building himself, through getting disciplined, and I had to coach him through saying no to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to say no. And he said, my wife has completely let up.
Yes.
She has finally relaxed. He said she's flirting with me more. She's way more feminine. She is changing as I've become stronger.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Always, right? Because you're changing. There used to be a thing, I remember one of my friends had a husband that I'm getting somewhere with this story, but she always used to pray for her husband because he was such a difficult man to deal with. She'd always be like, God, change him. God, change him. God, change him. And finally she's like, God, change me. And as she started changing, he started changing, and he became this amazing man. And I see the flip side too. And it's actually the same conversation. A lot of guys will come out and say, hey, there's something wrong with my wife.
Yep.
And it's instead of praying, God, change her, or what's wrong with her, it's where do I get to show up different? And I want to say that the first order of work is your identity. Because if you're still so dependent on her to determine who you are, which is why you're afraid, right? You're afraid because your identity is rising and falling on her mood and what she thinks and what she's happy about. She's the source of your identity. First of all, that's a total distortion because the only source of your identity is God, the one who created you. So if you want to know what your design is, spend some time there and spend time within yourself to get to know who you are, who you're created to be, right? Your gifts, your talents, your dreams, your desires. I mean, the way God created you to be is stop getting your identity from her. Because when you're doing that, you're going to her to take. It's like you're going to the feminine to get your strength, to get your identity. That is exhausting for the feminine because now I have to carry the weight of your self-worth.
Yeah.
That's a heavy burden. And again, it might feel good in the beginning to some women, like to get that power, but it is a power dynamic that's totally distorted and it ends up ruining the relationship. It sucks the life out of it. It zaps the passion. You're in this role reversal. Now you got a burnt out, exhausted, critical wife, or maybe one that just, you guys are roommates because you're going through these motions. You're playing this game. It's time to change the game.
So the guys turn into takers and not givers.
I think that's the biggest thing, that unconsciously men are going to women to get, to take. And actually, it was flipped. The masculine was supposed to be the provider. The woman still breathes life, right? So I talk a lot about masculine, feminine dynamics, but and again, I talk a lot about collective wounding, and the collective wounding of the feminine is that the masculine, and again, this goes back since the beginning of time, the masculine has always been coming to take, right? Through whatever, like force, rape. Women did not have a voice for like eons and eons, right? Like forever. And so we're just now in this era, really, where women have more of a voice and are partnering back up. And so I think that there's a collective wound. And so as men do the healing and men come up and they start to rise, rising fathers, rising husbands, and we're going to be this structure. We're going to be this safe place where you can actually relax. You don't have to sit here and worry like, oh, here he comes again. He's going to siphon my life force. You become the structure. Now, all of a sudden, she breathes life into you because that's what a woman is designed to do. She's designed to pour life and to nurture the relationship by speaking words of life into your dreams, into your vision, nurture your family, nurture your environment. But a woman who has to be the structure and the safety for the family can't also be the nurturer at the same time. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a role dynamic that has to.
A lot of guys unload on their wives. You could be a business owner, have any type of job, and whatever your stress of the day is, you come home and you unload on their wives. A lot of those same guys will say, I am going through life alone. I don't need other men to talk to. I'm doing it myself. But really, no, you're not doing it yourself. You're abusing your wife with all your baggage. You're just dumping your 100-pound bag on her shoulders. I hear that from a lot of guys. You would see that you would think are big, strong, and alpha and sustained and don't have issues. But no, they break down in front of their wives. Is there, I guess, a couple questions. Should a guy ever do that? Is there a correct way to do that? And, how about that? Should a guy just unload on his wife, this day's problems, or is there a better way to do that, or should he not do that?
That's a great question. And I think with anything, it's like, I don't think we're ever supposed to just dump everything onto the other person, but I do believe that we're designed to depend on each other, not to be codependent on each other. That means like, okay, you're the source of all my strength. We're there for each other in a healthy dynamic. The thing is that most people don't have a healthy dynamic. And so what happens is the dumping ground thing where you're carrying all your toxic crap that you just went through at work or all your family drama. I've seen it all, like family drama, ex-wife drama, kid drama, whatever. You come, and to your point, you are so unconscious of what you're bringing into the atmosphere. You might as well just bring garbage and dump it right into your family room, into your marriage. And then you're just like, okay, now clean that up. And so step one, I would say you need to be really, and again, this is one of the concepts I talk about in the book, is becoming a fierce protector of this space you've been entrusted to lead. It is your job, it is your responsibility, your mandate to protect what walks in through the front door, what gets dumped at your kitchen table, in your bedroom. So be aware of that. If you're bringing other people's stuff in, I would say find a way to handle it. Like, You need to have a transition protocol. You need to be, something in your car. I used to teach guys like sit in the driveway, do some breath work for a few minutes, right? Voice record, get this stuff out of you. You need to empty it out of you before you walk in that door. Because when you walk in, you have to decide what you're bringing in. You want to bring calm or you want to bring the hurricane, right? Do you want to bring anger or do you want to bring... So that's number one. The second thing though is like, look, you're still human. You're going to be stretched. There's going to be times where you are maybe questioning, do I have what it takes right now? I'm struggling with something. And I think, again, when you have a healthy dynamic between two people, you can have a healthy atmosphere for you to talk about what you're struggling with. You're not complaining and dumping garbage, but you're sharing from your heart. Maybe I'm struggling with some things. And again, the question is like, are you going to her because you want her to coach you through it? Are you just going because you want to complain? Or are you going because you're actually sharing your heart with her? And you guys are like linking arms, and you're like, hey, we're going to fight this together. We got this. I remember when my husband said, he was praying for a wife. He's like, God, I want a shield maiden. I want a woman that'll come beside me and like, she's going to go do battle with me. And whether it's in business or life or whatever. And we joke about it, but that's like how we view it. It's like, look, we're here. We're going to build together. We're going to fight together. We're going to laugh together. And there still also is a dynamic that he has to maintain as the masculine in the house. So he also has to know, is she in a position where she can handle all this stuff that I'm about to share with her? And that's where awareness is really important. If you don't have self-awareness, you are not going to have other awareness.
Yeah, I think if a guy does that, he's not going to have the emotional control to withhold that. Because he's been holding on to it all day. He sees his wife, he just throws it up all on top of her. I also get the sense that some guys want saved by their wives.
Totally.
That they've dug themselves into such a hole or in such an emotional mess that they just really want their wife to sweep them up and make them feel safe. It should be the opposite.
Totally. And again, there's all these dynamics, right? We got the mommy, the woman that treats her husband like a kid, like a toddler. She's telling him what to do. You've got, and so she's taken on the mother role. So I would say, okay, you got some mommy issues somewhere along the line that have been not dealt with. It could be a loss of a mother that, passed or wasn't away. It could be a lot of things. But if you have this distorted dynamic, you might have the two bulls in a china closet dynamic where you're both really masculine and you're both like competing for the alpha role, right? And instead of leading powerfully or doing that, you might be with an ice queen that is like, she just cuts like paper, And so, but you have to realize that all of those are also states of a wounded feminine. Whether you got the ice queen or the overbearing mother, or you've got a warrior that's like fighting you instead of fighting with you. Yeah. Like those are also dynamic of somebody else that's operating from an unsafe, wounded, self-protecting state. So if we play these games, right? And so the first thing is just to have some awareness instead of making the other person wrong or me wrong. It's like, look, we got this thing going on. Like, we don't like the atmosphere here. We don't like this role play thing that we're doing. What do you actually want a healthy relationship? Like, what does that even what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. And I want to say this, Chris, like a lot of times when I work with couples, I'll ask the guys and I'll ask the women, what is the purpose of your relationship? And they just kind of like, I don't know. What is the purpose? So you don't have to be alone. Like what's the purpose? So a lot of people can't answer that question. And then I'll ask, well, what's the glue that holds you guys together? A lot of people can't answer that one either. Our kids. Be careful if it's your kids.
Yeah. They leave.
Yeah.
That does happen a lot. A lot of guys, or I think a lot of couples, and this is where from my perception, this is where I see something start to fall apart in the marriage and also just individually, is the chaos of newborns, the chaos of toddlers in that time period. And the wife is getting up all hours of the day, the husband's getting up all hours of the day, maybe they have a dog that's going crazy, and then all their attention is focused on the kids, and they stop going on dates, they stop going to the gym, and they stop focusing on their marriage at all. But they also justify what they're doing because we're trying to focus on the children. But my message to those people would be, resist that. No matter what, you have to be concrete together. You have to continue to go on dates. And that's something I didn't do as much as I wish I would have when, 8-10 years ago when my wife was pregnant, and because we fell into that where we were stressed out. Life was chaotic, and I wish we would have gone on more dates. But I would say, hey, if you're in that crazy time of your life where you're still getting up at all hours of the day, man, pay for a babysitter, call grandma and grandpa, go on dates and make your wife dinner, do something, but you have to continue to focus on yourself. Do you see that? Has that shown up as a time period where tension starts to show for the first time? Because you go from like in love, passionate, to all of a sudden there's kids and chaos starts to come.
Yeah, I think I did a podcast interview earlier with someone. Excellence is intentional. Excellence happens on purpose, and it's a habit. So we want an amazing marriage. It doesn't happen by accident. It's easier when there's two of you. But if you want more, if you want to be blessed with more, whether it's kids, financial success, do you have the infrastructure to handle more? And the infrastructure is like, okay, automate, like date nights. They're on the calendar every Wednesday night, period. We're going out. We have a babysitter lined up every week. And if that falls through, then it gets moved to Friday. Like there's a system to support what you want. And so yes to date nights, but again, I think that we don't do it because we have to think about it. We're like, oh, where do you want to go for date night this week? What are we going to do? And one of the things my husband and I have done is like, look, we have a quarterly trip plan. It's on the calendar. We start December. We book out the whole year. We have our monthly thing that we do. We have our weekly thing. We have weekly meetings that we do. And we literally build our calendar. And we have 2 businesses, but we build it around the foundation that's like, okay, first for us anyways, it's God first, our relationship with ourselves and God first, then our relationship with each other, because I got to work on me first before I bring myself to the relationship, right? So that's first. Then it's us. Then it's the kids. Then it's like the mission, the business, whatever. And so like you have to build out your schedule in that order. You got to build out you're looking at your life. And I think we just forget. We're like, oh, it'll all work out. Like, it's just like a season. We're just in it right now. Yeah. And it's like, no, you forgot. Like now you got things out of order and you can't build the same house. So you're going to end up with a divided house, and eventually a house divided falls. You're trying to scramble to put pieces back together, or if like you can just build a system now, the disciplines, the structure, you both got to get on the same page, right? And that's a conversation is really, I think that most couples don't have, is like, hey, what kind of life do we want? What quality of marriage and relationship do we want? Because we can either create it or kind of like hope it happens.
Mm-hmm. So have better systems in place.
Yeah. And like the date night is a system.
Yeah.
The quarterly getaways is a system. You can go camping if you don't have a lot of money. Don't make money an excuse. Every December, Mark and I go away for 5 days and we like plan out the whole year. We get the calendars out and we plug it in. But the piece is really, are you going to hold it up? Are you going to follow through? Are we going to go like, oh, there's too much stuff going on. Let's just skip that. Oh, and now what we do is we create a culture where we actually don't keep our word to each other.
Yeah. That's dangerous. It becomes a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a lot about guys and characteristics of kind of weak men. And so let's talk about women. And because drop the armor could mean a lady that's shut down, cold, maybe a little bossy. Can you describe that a little bit?
Well, the armor is anything that is weighing you down or creating walls of resistance. And I want to say it's not always just those hardened things. Sometimes it is a hardened heart, unforgiveness, resentment, bitterness. Sometimes it's pain from our past that we're terrified of living again. So we're like trying to protect ourselves from another ultimate embarrassment, ultimate failure. A lot of it is shame. Shame is really, really heavy armor. It's when you look at the map of consciousness, I don't know if you do any teaching with that, but the map of consciousness, shame is one of the lowest, most densest energies or emotions out there. It's closest to death. So when we're carrying unresolved, unhealed shame from bad decisions we made, whatever it was, right? Whatever decisions, financial decisions, sexual decisions, like money, anything. If we don't heal that stuff, it gets really heavy. And so women are the same. That's why I say it's about people who are fighting and fighting and fighting, but we're fighting to self-protect, fighting for our image, fighting to avoid the pain of the past. And it's like, it gets heavier and it gets heavier and it gets heavier. One of the things I see a lot in women is a lot of resentment, a lot of resentment, a lot of feeling invisible, unheard, unwanted, and so they, often I do a lot of work with women that are just nagging a lot or over explaining and over talking. And it's like, they're trying so hard to communicate. And it's like falling on deaf ears, right? And probably because the guy doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't, it's like probably making him feel worse about himself. Her approach is probably wrong. And so she gets more and more and more hardened. Her heart gets hardened towards him. Her words get harder, more critical. And so again, it's like all of these things are just, surface level symptoms of what's really going on. Why is our heart so hard? Probably have a lot of pain we haven't dealt with. A lot of resentment we haven't cleaned up. A lot of unforgiveness we haven't dished out.
Mm-hmm. If you're in one of those relationships, that's been the tone of your relationship for years, what starts the healing process for that?
I think the first order of business is making a decision that you're not going to live like that anymore. Like really, deciding is such a powerful energy. It's such a powerful state, but most of us live in a state of indecision. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'll start tomorrow if the temperature's right and the mood is good, instead of saying, I refuse to go one day longer, operating from this place. And so if I've been operating from fear, great. What's the scary conversation? What's the one thing that is going to require courage right now? By the way, the word courage means to come back to the heart. If you look at the root of it, right? It's like encouraged is in the heart. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to do the thing that feels scary. I'm going to have the conversation. But I think the first thing is deciding you guys aren't going to live like that anymore. And if you can, first of all, you have to have it for yourself. But I think if there's a couple out there that can say, you know what, we will both have the awareness to know that it's like, we don't like the atmosphere. We're done. It gets to look different. And so we're both committed to making it look different. There's first the agreement. So I want to use a simple example. Mark and I, my husband and I, have an agreement that we keep the energy clean, because we both had marriages where it was like toxic all the time. We were just waiting for like this snarky comment or the rude thing. And it was always like competition in the air. And so we came from that background. So for us to be like, you know what, we're going to keep the energy clean between us. So if there's like stuff that feels friction, we're just going to address it right away. So now we're like giving each other permission, right? Like, hey, if there's friction here, instead of going like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? Did I do something wrong? It's like, hey, what's the friction about? Mm-hmm. We can address the thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so many variations of that pop up for so many guys, of the type of friction that occurs in their relationship. I know even in my own marriage, you can just look through and say, oh, well, whenever we talk about this certain thing, there's more tension. Whenever we're in this situation, mm-hmm. It could be with her parents, with my parents, or with this, in various mm-hmm. situations, like tension pops up, and it's easy to kind of gloss over that, not address it, and let that continue to fester. What I've seen with some guys that I'm working with is, whenever you have like little problems easily turn into bigger problems.
Huge.
Like the crack grows every single day the longer you decide to leave it unaddressed. Mm-hmm. And I had one guy who talked about his marriage flourishing and being in love and passionate, and now they're sleeping in separate bedrooms. But the spoken word between them is, we're sleeping in separate bedrooms because of our kids, so that they can sleep mm-hmm. better. And these, and then we talk to them, and then they haven't had sex in 9 months, and there's just, the crack continues to grow. Yeah. But if that crack has been growing for years or months, mm-hmm. it takes time to heal it. Like it takes time to go back. And the guy will say, well, I don't know if it's too far gone. I don't know if it's too late for me to do the hard work. What would you say to a guy from the female's perspective who, because from a guy, like, a lot of them think it's hopeless. A lot of them see the relationship and have memories of what it used to be like, how in love they were. And then they see their wife now, and from their perspective, the wife just seems cold, like she does not care.
Yeah.
And from the wife's perspective, what does she need to hear from this guy?
I'm just going to say this. If she's cold and disconnected, I would ask you, like, when did you check out? Like, are you still fighting for the marriage? Because ultimately, again, I talk a lot about original design. Like, how are we created from the beginning? And like, the feminine is like, are you fighting for me? Part of the masculine is the heart of pursuit. Right? You're there to provide, protect, pursue, right? Like and you're there for more, but like part of that is the pursuit. And every woman has it in her to desire to be pursued.
Yeah.
Not so that I can save you, not so that I can fix all your problems, not so that I can pick up after you, but like that you genuinely are pursuing her. And so I think one of the things that gets just assumed is like, well, of course I want her. Of course I'm going to fight for her. And it's like, yeah, but you don't say it. Do you know what I mean? And every woman still wants to hear, like, I choose you. You're the one for me. I'm going to fight for you. I'm fighting for us. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And you lead. That's what it means to lead. You're not waiting for her to be the one that says, okay, I'm going to fight for us and make her lead, but you actually lead. And that's what leadership is. Leaders go first. So if you recognize that there's a problem, you recognize that the little paper cut now has turned out to a huge bleeding out wound, or the crack has turned into a canyon. Guess what? Do you want the canyon to get bigger? If you don't, start getting to work on building a bridge. Like, right?
And that guy will say, well, I've been trying hard for 2 months and she's still the same. Mm-hmm. When do I stop?
I would ask him, have you actually said those words to her? Like, I'll address the thing. There's a canyon here. I'm committed to building a bridge. I love you. I'm going to fight for us. And this is the marriage I want with you. Like, to some extent. And I know it sounds like, ooh, a lot of guys are like, what? I'll just do all the things and then expect that she can just see me making the effort. And then of course she'll know. But there's just, a woman wants to hear these things. Mm-hmm. Like, I got you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm fighting for us. And you invite her. And again, this is part of the feminine, is like, she wants to be invited into the vision, into the project. Like, we just want to know, we want to be part of it, but don't like, and that's also what I believe God's design for women. Like, when you think about back to like Adam in the garden, like Adam was created out of the outback, out of the dirt, and he was given the land to work. Like, he had to know how to be a provider before he could get the woman, like, work the land, multiply the land, then you get this companion to multiply it even more. But Adam was created in the outback. Eve was created in the garden, where there was already structure, and he was already building and creating. So it's just interesting. I use the origin story sometimes, because whether you're a faith or you have other things, origin stories are very similar, but there are things that are just implanted in the masculine DNA and things that are planted in the feminine DNA. And every woman is asking, am I the beauty that you want? Like, there's so many beautiful women. Like, am I the one? Are you pursuing me? Or can you provide physical safety, emotional safety, and other ways? This doesn't mean women can't make great money, obviously, but there's lots of ways to provide. And will you protect her? Right? Or are you just going to be the one that comes in and just dumps your garbage all over the place? And that's not protection.
Yeah, it's sad. If you're a guy and you recognize yourself in this description, it's not too late to change. You can change yourself.
Yeah.
But if it makes you feel bad, experience the pain, experience the regret, and it's okay to feel those feelings, because they're deserved. They're feelings that you must experience and dig into if you want to make a change. Like, isn't your wife worth it? Isn't she worth experiencing pain right now so that you can make a massive change for her? And there's many men who have reversed the roles, where you are unloading on your wife and you're going to her for security and safety.
Yeah. And
then you're wondering why there's resentment. You're wondering why there's no passion, why there's no sex. Are women attracted to, if I come home and I unload on my wife and I bitch about my problems for an hour and how I'm scared for the future, and is that attractive?
it's attractive to somebody that has a bunch of trauma and has that's normal for them. This is like, what do you want to attract, right? I did a little post earlier, like, to the queens out there, if you're looking for, a true queen will attract a king. So if you want to be a king, I mean, I use this language a lot, right? If you want to be a king and you want to attract a queen, you got to start acting like a king. If you keep attracting a princess or an ice queen or whatever, you got to ask yourself, how am I showing up? Right? Because so you might be getting attention, but you're perpetuating what you're tolerating. So if you, and again, like, there's men that I've worked with too, that's like their mamas were just like loving on them and they were mama's boys and they always got everything taken care of and they still are that way. And so they just expect their wives to be the same way. And it's like, no, like, she's your wife. She's not your mother. Unless you want one. Right. And so then if that's your idea of success, go for it. But to your answer, like, the question is really, do you want a healthy, grounded, integrated relationship? Okay. Then a healthy, grounded, integrated woman is not going to find that attractive. It's going to be repellent. And I think at the root, it is repellent because there's a design for relationships to thrive. When we're in our right identity and we're in right relationship, there's like a multiplication that happens. Like it's like rocket fuel. You feel more alive. You have more desire for your business. You're excited about growing your business. Your bandwidth isn't getting sucked up thinking about what you're going to come home to or have to avoid. There's life. And that's a reflection of you've got things in the right order. You're not feeling guilty about working out and guilty about this and guilty about everything else, right? I was having a talk with somebody that was like, my wife gets really upset when I start working out. Yeah. And I start looking really fit and I'm looking great. And then she's just like tries to sabotage me. And I say, okay, so obviously she's feeling insecure, right? Like she's obviously feeling insecure. She's got maybe carrying extra weight. What are you doing? Like, does she know that she's loved, that she's chosen, that she's the one, right? Like, are you inviting her along? Are you just off doing your thing? Like, are you encouraging her, right? You got to continue to lead, but don't stop because of her insecurities. You lead from security.
Yeah, and to a guy like that, what I've heard a similar thing, because guys join my program to improve themselves, and that doesn't mean that your wife is at the exact same spot as you. So you can't control their phase of life. And what I found is that nothing motivates, nothing makes a lady feel better. If she's out of shape or insecure, just tell her she looks beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, if
exactly.
she thinks you think she's beautiful, she's going to want to take care of herself. And if I just same thing with you. If you love and respect yourself, you're going to want to do things and be more disciplined because you love and respect yourself. Yeah. If you stopped giving your wife compliments years ago and stopped telling her how beautiful she was and chasing her and pursuing her, then she's not going to feel the same way about herself. So whether you feel it or not, man, babe, you look amazing today. You look beautiful. Like, put on a show. Let her make her feel special. I think
there's something beautiful about her that you can notice, right? And I mean, I get it. Like sometimes you do have conversations with men where they're like, I'm just not attracted to her. She's put on a ton of weight. Like she's not taking care of herself. Like I'm not. But there is something about her that you can celebrate. There's something about her that you can say, you know what? I love your smile, or I love the way you're showing up, or thank you. Like you still need to build her up. And I do believe that there are levels to our emotional and relational maturity. And so as we grow and we mature in our relationship, and now we're both at a place where we're both investing in our health and stuff, like, you can have the conversation of like, look, we're getting sloppy over here. We have a higher standard for how we want to live life. We want more energy. We got a business. We got things that we want to do, places we want to see. Like, let's get better care of each other together. Like, let's up level our health. Now we can have fun competition together around it, right? And these are the fun conversations that I get to have with my husband. It's like, hey, let's double down on getting like ultra fit in the next 90 days, or let's really see how much we can increase our capacity or whatever. But that's like different levels of the relationship maturing. So you can call each other up, because now you're having conversations around like standards you guys want to hold together, right? And it's not from judgment. It's like, come on, let's go get it,
Yeah, that's level 8, and some people are on level 1 right now. Where
I know, but I think it's
judgment.
important to let them know, like, this is the normal, right? Like, in a great relationship where you do the work at level 1, these are the conversations you get to have as the norm at level 8. And so as long as, like, it's out there, it's real, and it's awesome.
Yeah. What if you breathed life into each other instead of sucked it out of the other person?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a nice thing?
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, as we come to a close here, give us because the book has Drop the Armor.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the underlying message from the book that would really pierce the soul of a man listening right now that he can take from it? And like, that would be like, I got to go out and buy this book right now.
Well, look, if you've been fighting battles your whole life and you have hit that point where you're like, I cannot keep doing this. I cannot keep doing what I've always done. I'm exhausted. Something's got to give. And I would say that maybe you're at a place where also you don't want to go alone. Like, you're ready to ignite your faith, to wake up a little bit spiritually in your heart, get back to your heart and do this a different way. This is the book for you. I wrote the book because after decades of hustling, grinding, fiercely independent, trying to always compete with the opposite sex, I got so tired. I was like, I know that I wasn't designed for these kind of like, halfway relationships, grinding it out every day. Like, there's got to be a different way. And so it's really a journey of releasing all of that weight, pain, trauma, drama, like all of the lies you tell yourself about your identity, releasing the old identity, releasing the old programs, really getting out of your head, dropping into your heart so that you can establish a new way forward. And so Drop the Armor is exactly that. It's release the past, ignite your faith, and start to unlock the extraordinary life that you're created for. And so there's a pathway, 12 steps I take people through. And it was really the journey that I went through to where I am today. And I have the level 8 relationship. I'm doing work that's amazing. And I was very much operating from a lot of past wounding for decades. And I think a lot of people out there, most people are trying to avoid pain when they're creating. They're not actually consciously creating a relationship, a business, a life that they want by design. They're trying to avoid pain. And so the more you try to create by avoiding pain, the more pain you create.
Beautiful. There's truth in pain. There's growth in pain.
There is.
Where would you like people to go to access you, contact you, find more?
You guys can, right now, you guys can go to thechristinejewell.com/drop it. I'm giving away the first 2 chapters of the book, so you guys can download it. There's a beautiful love letter I wrote to all the warriors out there, as well as I talk about the perfect storm moment, which is the breakdown, which was really the breakthrough to the new life. So you can get those chapters for free, and you can also pre-order the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all major channels like that. So other than that, I would say that that's a great first step. You can find me at thechristinejewell.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was awesome.